Hello, hello, brilliant humans. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by my 3-day workshop called Impossible to Ignore, Create Messaging That Gets People to Pay Attention, which kicks off on April 5th. This workshop series is going to help you create the high-level messaging that positions you as the go-to in your industry and also helps you to start shaping the kind of content that will get people to pay attention, the right people actually to pay attention and also take action. You might be wondering, is this right for me? Who is this even for? And that is a great question. This workshop is designed for two types of people. One is established entrepreneurs who know what they want to say, but are struggling with how they want to say it in the most effective way possible. Person number two is established entrepreneurs who are pivoting or are in a season of shift or transition. You're making some changes to your business, whether that's big changes or small changes, and you want to make sure that you have a cohesive message that ties everything together moving forward so that you are talking to the right people, that your pivot makes sense for people, and that all of the things you want to talk about in this new shift, in this new transition, actually come together in a really seamless way. This workshop is not a fluffy training that is disguised as a workshop. It is actually a true workshop where I'm going to hold your hand through the process of developing 4 messaging pillars that you will walk away with at the end of our 3 days together that you can start to implement right away. So if that's something you're looking for, if you are wanting help with your messaging, if you are in those 2 seasons of either wanting to tighten up your messaging or pivoting and you want to make sure that your messaging is on point, then this is the workshop for you. You can go to denightbg.com/workshop to learn more and register. Again, we are kicking off on April 5th, and I am so excited for this workshop. I cannot wait to walk you through these 4 elements and help you create some cohesive strategic messaging that's going to help you start getting the right people to pay attention to your brilliant, brilliant work. Again, that's denightbg.com/workshop. All of the details will be in the show notes so that you can go learn more, and I hope to see you there, my friend. Now let's dive into today's episode where we're going to be talking about the difference between messaging, positioning, and content, because I find that people aren't really clear on what all 3 of these elements are, how they work together, how they work independently, what they mean, what they look like in your business. And so I want to break that down for you in today's episode. So we hear the terms messaging, positioning, content thrown around a lot, and maybe they're used interchangeably, especially content and messaging. You hear people use the word content to mean messaging and messaging to mean content sometimes. Sometimes they're used separately, where content means something different, messaging means something different, positioning means something different. But I find, like I said, that people don't really have a clear grasp on what these 3 things are and how they work together to really create this cohesive, irresistible, impossible to ignore brand. So let's break it down and dive into each element separately. The way that I want you to think about these 3 elements is like a Russian nesting doll situation. If you don't know what Russian nesting dolls are, they are these dolls that are carved out of wood in varying sizes from big to little and then painted in these really beautiful colors. And then each of these dolls fits inside each other. They are nested inside each other so that when it's all said and done, you see just this one doll. But then when you pick that doll up, there's another doll inside, and then you pick that one up, and then there's another doll inside that one. If you've ever seen someone, put a small box in a bigger box, and then they keep putting smaller boxes in each of those boxes, that's how I want you to think about these 3 elements, that they nest into each other. And messaging is the big box. It acts as the foundational piece, that foundational element that the positioning and content are then built around. Messaging answers the questions of who you are, what you're about, what is it that you want to say, why do you want to say it, and who do you want to say it to? That's why it's so foundational, because it answers all of the key questions that need to be answered in order for your content, your offers, all of those things to make sense and for you to be positioned as the go-to. You can't be positioned as the go-to if you don't know what you're trying to say, who you're trying to say it to, why you're even trying to say it, what you're all about. Those are things that help to shape how you're positioned in the marketplace. When you're able to answer those questions, it helps you to develop things like your movement statement, your positioning statement, a purpose or a mission statement, your values, your big idea ideas. And these are the things that then become the blueprint for how you'll talk about things moving forward in your business. Positioning then is the next layer, and it's nestled within your messaging. You cannot start to position yourself without having a clear messaging strategy. To have really effective positioning that has you being recognized as the expert that you are, you need to have really solid messaging first. Positioning is where your message starts to become more tangible and more tactical, because positioning answers the question of how will you frame your message to connect with the right people. It's answering that question of, okay, now we have this message. How do we get it in front of the right people? How do we frame it so that the right people are connecting and engaging and resonating with it? Your message is something that's coming from deep within, right? It's the things that you are on fire, your soul is on fire to communicate to the world. It's what drives your work. It's what lights you up. These are the ideas, the concepts that you want to get across to your perfect fit people. So messaging is about looking within for the answers to those questions. And then positioning is the thing that takes those internal ideas and brilliance and asks, okay, how do we communicate this in a way that people who aren't in my head and my heart will understand? Positioning is about starting to look outside of yourself and your perspective and looping in the perspective of the audience that you are trying to reach. So what does positioning look like tangibly in our businesses? We position our message in a variety of different ways. Positioning is actually something that touches almost every aspect of our business, because a lot of the things that we do as entrepreneurs is positioning our message for the consumption of our audience. Positioning looks like your visual brand, the colors, the fonts, the images that you choose to use to reflect your message in a visual way that resonates with your audience. Your static messaging is another form of your positioning. And by static messaging, I just mean messaging that doesn't tend to change. An example of this is your website copy. Once you write your website copy, a lot of times we're not changing that on a regular, consistent basis. That's something that we are maybe updating, yearly, quarterly, every 6 months, but not something that's changing every single day, day to day, week to week, right? So that's your static messaging. Another element of positioning is dynamic messaging, like your content. This is something that is changing pretty regularly because you are creating new and fresh content. Speaking engagements and speaking topics are another element of your positioning because they are helping you to frame your message in a very specific way for speaking on stages or in conferences or things like that. And this list could go on because, like I said, positioning touches almost every aspect of your business. It is whenever you are taking your message and framing it in a very specific way for your audience's consumption, whatever that looks like. And it could be visually, written, video. All of those things are a form of positioning. My work specifically, and the things that I help my clients with, is focusing on positioning your message through your content and your offers, and really answering the question of how do we position your content so that your audience resonates with it and gets it, and how do we position your offers so that your audience is ready to hit buy before you ever even sell to them. I mostly focus on this because it's the most nimble form of positioning that we have, because it's always changing. We can very quickly adjust our content and the things that we're talking about to align with what our audience is responding to or engaging with or resonating with. And we can always refine and change our offers to align with what our audience wants as well. The more quickly and strategically we can make these positioning changes in our content and our offers, the better positioned we are to be positioned as the go-to in our industry and really start to see the types of results that we want to see in our business. And so those are the two types of positioning that I work with my clients on. But like I said, there are a variety of ways that you can think about positioning in your own business. Content is then nestled under positioning in that it is a form of positioning. It's taking that positioning a step further, and it answers the question of what do we need to talk about in order to communicate our messaging effectively. Some of the other forms of positioning answer different questions, like the visual branding part of our positioning answers the question of what does does our brand need to look like to resonate with the types of people that we want to work with? Content, on the other hand, answers the question of what do we need to talk about in order to communicate this message effectively and to position us as the go-to. More specifically, we're diving deep into the person that we want to help most and answering the questions and the concerns and the hesitations that they might have, addressing the thoughts and the beliefs that are keeping them stuck, painting a picture of what's possible, helping them to see that we understand them and we see them and we know what the steps are to get them to the transformation that they're looking for. This all stems from the messaging that you develop. If you do not have a clear messaging strategy, this overarching blueprint for how you need to talk about things or what you need to even be talking about, then it's going to be really difficult to create content that's in line with that and supports that messaging strategy. And then it becomes even harder to be positioned as the go-to because your message isn't going to be cohesive, your content isn't going to be cohesive, and everything is going to be all over the place. And that's where I see people struggling with content that's not really resonating and connecting with their audience. And it's also not converting them into paying clients. People may be looking at your work, they may be reading your posts, they may be listening to your podcast, they may be reading your emails, but they're not taking that next step. They're not going and taking that additional step to becoming a paid client. When your messaging strategy is not very clear, then your content is not going to be very clear and direct either. It's not going to be very specific to what your audience is looking for and what they need to know from you in order to make a buying decision. Content is where we take all of your big messaging ideas, all those big, beautiful things that you want to share with your audience, and turn it into bite-sized and highly valuable pieces of content that your audience can connect with, that they can resonate with, that then helps them to make a buying decision. If you're listening to this and going, okay, I actually need to work on my messaging architecture, I think that that is the reason why I am feeling really disjointed in my messaging, feel like I'm not positioning myself really well or creating the types of content that's actually getting people to the buying decision stage, then I invite you to join me for my 3-day workshop where I'm actually going to help you do exactly that. In the 3 sessions that we'll spend together, I will actually help you develop 4 key messaging pillars that you can start to use to communicate the value of what you do more clearly. And the best part is that this workshop is only $147, which is a steal to get my eyes on your content, your messaging, all of that good stuff. You can learn all of the details and register over at tonightbg.com/workshop. I hope I see you there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me over on Instagram, or you can email me. I will put all of those details in the show notes as well. I hope that this episode gave you a lot of clarity, really helped you to see where you can start to hone in your messaging, your positioning. What parts do you need to actually go back and tweak so that you can communicate more effectively with your audience in a way that gets them to the buying decision and actually allows you to do what you do best, which is help them get to the transformation that they're looking for. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will catch you in the next one, my friends.